Hey everyone, welcome to D Time Season 1, Episode 44, The Way of the Rooster. And if you don't know what that means, I wanted to talk about learning new things. And in particular, there's a friend of mine, Russell Fox, who's very talented and very interested in learning new things. And one of the things that he's learning and has helped teach to many people out here in Seattle is how to salsa. And so I heard that salsa is referred to as rooster sauce or something where he'll be able to give more insight into that. So that's where the title comes from. But our discussion is a lot about learning new things and specifically salsa. But I think it's important to learn new things an adult, as an individual. It's good to learn new things. One of the things that I set out on my list was to learn photography, and I'm glad I did. I had no prior really interest in photography. It was just something that I thought I could use the creative side of my brain, artistic side of my brain to really apply myself to, and it's been cool really learning about photography. And I think we should aspire to learn new things, to try at improving in different areas of our lives, areas where we're most likely, uninitiated at first. And so Russell's going to chat with me about learning new things and what he's learned from those new things and kind of what started the whole salsa experience. And so I'm excited to hear what he has to say. Excited for you guys to hear from him as well. But reach out to us. What are some new things that you're learning? What are some things that you've embarked on that's new this year? Or, by the time of the airing of this episode, it'll be 2020. So maybe what are some things you're looking forward to learning in 2020? And give us some feedback, some thoughts, and share some maybe tips or tricks on when learning new things, how to be successful at them. So stick around for part 2 where we talk about salsa and learning new things. Peace. Hey, welcome back to D Time. I have a very special guest who's going to talk about salsa, and that's Russell Fox. So Russell, thank you for joining us for D Time.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, man. So before we kind of dive into it, why don't you take a couple minutes just to introduce yourself for those listening?
Yeah. Well, as you said, my name is Russell Fox. I'm from a super small town of about 200 people up right by the border of Canada and Washington. And grew up in a small town, went to a relatively big high school, and then right now I'm currently attending the University of Washington. And this is my last quarter of school, so I'm super excited to be able to enter into the working force. I've studied many different things, but I've got my degree right now is going to be in political science with a option in the international security, as well as a minor in Espanol, so Spanish. So those things have kind of been the main passions throughout my life. I've noticed just early on I was always kind of drawn towards the political realm when I was younger, and in following in my sister's footsteps, she kind of led me to Spanish. So when I was taking it in high school, I just had a super amazing Spanish teacher, and he really imparted a lot of his love of Spanish onto me. And I've just continued with it because you know what they say, if you don't use it, you lose it, right?
Right.
So, yeah, it was just kind of like a fear of I've just spent 5 years learning all this, and if I look back and I'm 25 or 30 and I can't speak a word of it, all that time was just kind of wasted. So that's what I'm going into. I'm super excited for the future, what's just been going on in my life recently. So that's kind of the spark notes of it all.
Nice. That's awesome, man. Yeah. So funny thing. So the title of this episode It's called The Way of the Rooster. Now, I might have been like lost in my notes or research when looking into salsa. I think I heard somewhere that it's either a form of salsa or has something to do with roosters or something like that. So if the title is off, forgive me.
Mhm.
But um, when
Yeah,
it comes to
so
salsa, what kind of made you get into salsa?
yeah, just to help you on that last point, the word salsa in Spanish means sauce.
Right.
So that could be anything from ketchup to mustard to what most people would know as salsa, which is like your spicy kind of chopped tomato bits. And one of
Mm-hmm.
the more famous salsas is called pico de gallo, which
Mm-hmm.
means beak of the rooster. Pico
Maybe
is
that's
the
what it
beak,
is.
and then gallo is where you're getting your rooster from.
Gotcha.
So I still think it's a fun title, so I'd
Nice.
stick with it. But
We'll
to
take.
get onto the salsa, like I said, speaking Spanish was always like a kind of passion of mine once I hit high school, and we always kind of touched on different Spanish cultures. You're not just learning how to say different words and different conjugations and verbs and everything like that. You get ingrained into that culture so that you can have a better understanding of it. And me and my background growing up, I never danced at all. I can only remember once attending a middle school dance, and that was I think in 2011. And so it was like the music of the time, I think like EDM was just coming out, and so I really only ever remember dancing to one song, and it was a bunch of me and my friends flopping on the floor for like 30 seconds after the beat dropped. So
Mhm.
I never really had an interest in dancing until we started exploring it a bit in Spanish classes. So we would watch videos of this is what tango looked like. This is merengue. This is salsa. This is like all these different forms. And you learned about it, but it was like, oh, I'm not a singer. I'm not a dancer. I'm not like a performer type person. I always just kept it on the back burner. And
Mhm.
so it wasn't until I remember this very defining moment that got me into salsa dancing was uh, after I'd graduated high school, my school offered a trip. If you paid $3,000, you'd got to go with the teachers down to Central America for about 3 weeks
Mhm.
to do a homestay and then some more touristy, fun type activities. And I remember one night there was a big group of the students, and our teachers took us out to a bar. They're like, we want to get it out of your system. We want to be there for you. You're not going to drink anything, but you can have the experience of it. And I remember
Mhm.
I was standing in this bar with a bunch of my close friends, and I just felt this like feeling of being bummed out. It's like, man, I don't even know how to dance anything. And I'm just kind of standing there, and I was like, in that moment, I kind of made a vow to myself, like, oh, I know I'm going to the University of Washington. It's a big school. They gotta have some type of like dancing club there, right? I think I'm gonna take salsa.
Mhm.
So it was kind of that moment, that feeling of like, oh, I really missed out. I never want to miss out on something like this again, a once in a lifetime opportunity. So once I got to UW, I started researching and I hunted down the salsa club, and I remember it was really tough for me at first, but I kept practicing and kept practicing. And 2 years later, after being in the club, I got good enough to be invited onto the UW salsa team.
Oh
So
wow.
yeah, we weren't like competing against other like college dance teams. What we did is we more served the community. We went out and we did like different cultural events, and just special things. I remember dancing right beneath the Space Needle during the summer for, just a big festival that they had going on there to a huge crowd, and it was just so much fun. And, um, sadly, it was after that I started getting slammed more and more with school, so I had to taper off. But recently, I took a course here at the University of Washington on salsa dancing. So got to learn a lot more of the history of it. I got to learn the different styles and everything that came with it. And it was just a far greater experience because now I can teach it to people.
Nice. Nice. That's awesome, man. So when it comes to salsa, now that you've kind of gotten like a more, immersed in it as the years have gone, what would you say is the most challenging thing about it?
I think one of the more challenging things about it is literally the basic. So that's the first thing that you're going to learn in salsa is how to do a basic. The initial 6 steps that you take. You continue it throughout the whole dance. It's a little unnatural. And if you're coming with no dancing experience, it just feels like, man, how do I even overcome this? And for me, I felt like that for the first couple of club meetings. And the thing was just being determined to, if I can get this down, that's all I need. That's all you need for salsa dancing. It's just the basic. You could dance your basic for your 3-minute song and you're technically salsa dancing. All the extra flurls and spins and crazy maneuvers, that's just like the flair you want to put on top to have more fun with it. But if you get that basic down, that's all you need.
Awesome. So, in thinking of those, lessons and steps and things like that, is there anything about salsa that you feel translates outside of the dance floor?
Yeah, I would think that, with salsa, it kind of ties into a different culture. Because it's really seen that when you go out salsa dancing, you shouldn't isolate yourself with just one person. It's not, oh, you showed up with your best friend or your date or whoever it is and you isolate your whole time with that one person. The whole thing is that it's a community event, You have to be, courageous to walk up to someone and ask them to dance, 99 times out of 100, they're going to say yes, or that one time it's because they're like so exhausted from dancing, that they can't do it anymore. But, it just kind of grows you. It pushes you to put yourself in a bit of a more uncomfortable situation, being a partner dance. It's like learning how to read another person, what they want to do to be able to multitask, to talk and while you're doing it. So, that's kind of what I've taken out of it from, applying it to my, life is that, just being more bold, being able to take that risk and realizing that, that person across from you is usually in the same situation.
Oh, that's awesome, man. That's a good thing to know. So earlier in the first part of the episode, I was talking about, salsa, but trying new things. There are a couple things that I have like on a bucket list that, things that I want to try, and photography was one of them. And so I think, my viewpoint is like, it's important to put yourself in uncomfortable situations, kind of like what you did with salsa. So what advice would you give to someone who wants to try new things, whether it be salsa or anything really? What advice would you give them in kind of helping them kind of take that step?
I'd say that the advice I'd give is that you really you gotta want it. It's something my dad always said, is that you're perfectly smart enough, you're physically strong enough, whatever it can be. You just gotta want it. And if you have that desire, you're gonna find a way to make it happen. For me, I did things the harder way. I didn't have like a community of people or like a group of best friends that went out. I was just determined by myself, this is what I want to do. I want to salsa dance. I'd advise, that you get a community of people around you or someone to help push you there, maybe keep you accountable, so that you can actually get progress or that you can go through it with someone, I always think of, you got to take the opportunities in life that you're given. Some of the crazier things in life, like my dad, he wants to go skydiving with all of his kids. I'm terrified of heights, but because it's my dad, I'd go skydiving with him because who knows? What if I end up loving it halfway down, I think that you just don't know what you don't know. So you got to try it. And when you try, you got to give it all your heart. Because if you go into it with the expectation that you're going to fail or that it's not going to be fun, it's going to be weird, then you're going to be stuck in it. But if you just let yourself loosen up, you enjoy the moment, you're going to find yourself either falling in love with it or like, man, maybe this isn't for me. And then you can move on to that next thing.
Awesome. No, that's great, man. It's great advice. So kind of adding to that, I like to ask everyone that I sit down with, this question. And the question is, what's the best piece of advice that someone's giving you? And it doesn't have to do with this topic. It can be about anything.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I can think of two. Both happen to come from my dad. I don't know if he's quoting them from something else. He watched a lot of sports in his life, so he could pull it from someone, and I'd have no idea. But one of them is that practice doesn't make perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect. And it's just this idea of, going after something with your whole heart. You want to get good at kicking a soccer ball. There's a difference between, just kind of swinging your leg and pushing it down the field to, all right, let me get the technique down. Let me take the time. All right, let's focus in on the little nuances and go over it again and again. I need to make this perfect. And so, that's helped me with, school, for sure is like, all right, there's a big difference between kind of getting the idea down and getting the idea perfectly down, and they take note of that, that's what you're getting graded on. So I'd say that was one. And then the other one that I mentioned earlier, you just gotta want it. Human desire, the human will is such a crazy thing. It came out most for me when I did wrestling. Just a sport that is, honestly, it's 80-90% willpower, and the rest of it is technique and strength. It's just trying to use your will to, surpass someone else's will when the challenges come. And if you want it bad enough, you'll feel it. You'll make the sacrifices. I've seen people practice ultimate frisbee in like freezing temperatures with their shirts and shorts on out in the middle of the night because they want to be great at it. If you want it, you're going to find the ways to make it happen. And if you want it bad enough, you're going to enjoy it along the way too.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, so true. So true, man. Yeah, thanks for sharing those, man. And thanks for taking the time to chat about something that you care a lot about, and that's salsa. So for those listening, if you have any questions for Russell or questions about salsa, leave a comment in the comment section on this episode, and you can follow the podcast at DTime Podcast on Twitter and Instagram, and dtimepodcast@gmail.com. Russell, thanks so much, man, for taking the time and dropping some knowledge, man. Appreciate it.
All right, anytime.